Hello and welcome back to the Scale Modelling Cafe. My name is Jamie and welcome to part 3 of the Avia S-199 Mezek in 1/72 scale by Eduard. So in this episode we're going to deal with the construction, and as you can see I'm starting on the wings, so just priming all the parts I'm going to paint, and then they had an undercoat of black by MRP, and this is the same as the cockpit episode on the last one. So all the parts here on the wings were done, and it just takes a little bit of study. Just have a look through the instructions, and then you can identify all the parts that you're going to paint first, and as you can see, including the undercarriage legs. And then to continue the pre-shading and the highlights, I went in with MRP white, so just doing the sort of middle of all the panels. And I just thought I'd give this technique a go. It seemed to work okay in the cockpit, so why not try it here? And then MRP again, this time RLM02 for all these internal bits. Now the instructions call out for dark grey, which I'm assuming is RLM66, so you know, trusting their research, I'm guessing that I made a bit of a boo-boo here and all this should have been RLM66, but not to worry, it looks okay in the end. And now for a wash. So this is Trax Wash by Ammo of MIG, and it was just brushed on and in places, and then using capillary action in other places just to draw it along all the raised detail. So it's quite a dark tone, as you can see, so there's lots of contrast, but it's a small scale, so that's no bad thing. And then just using a cotton bud, the surface was just gently polished, and that would just remove the excess. It's important not to apply too much pressure, otherwise you will clean it too much, and obviously that's not what we want to do. We just want to leave the wash in the recesses and in the nooks and crannies. And at the end, eventually all that was sealed in with some VMS satin varnish. Okay, the difference to their 48 scale 109 kits is the landing gear wheel parts are single piece, but what's really nice is you may be able to see that the where the gear leg goes is actually hollowed out, which is really nice. So that bodes well for the 1/48 scale K that's coming, and hopefully in 72nd scale the FGK. But I really like that. That's a really neat solution. And now we're just going to put the wings together. So as you can see, the one piece lower and two piece uppers. If I can get it to focus. And you can see just a dry fit there. The fit's really nice. There isn't actually too much of a sort of visible join, if you like. So you've got this wing tip here, and there is a little peg and a hole just to help you to align. But that only needs just the tiniest amount of glue just to stick that down. And then there's the only other visible seam really is along the leading edge. These parts here on the slats, that's all going to be covered up by the actual slat itself, which is obviously a separate part. And then at the trailing edge, you've got the aileron and the flaps and the sort of radiator sort of flap blah. But it's important there, just put a little bit of glue in there, just on the inboard edge, and that will set the height, and that will give you a nice wing root join. and just a peg just to hold it down, and that would just, you know, it will just help it set without moving, and that's all going to pay off in the long run. And now the leading edge, the fit is absolutely awesome on that leading edge. So just using the Ammo of MIG extra thin with that really fine brush, just going to gently sweep the brush along, and that's all you need. Now for the fuselage. So using some Ammo black super glue, which is rubberized, so it's not as brittle, and there's a little bit of surface detail just there in front of the windscreen, which it's really hard actually to try and preserve. It's very fine detail, to sort of, I don't know what they are, access hatches or something. So precision is key here. And then just touching it with a little bit of accelerator, just using a mic brush. Which reminds me, I need to order some more off Amazon. And then just gently squeezing it as the glue dries, and that'll help it to sort of stay in place. And the fit of these bits here is really precise. I mean, there's almost no visible join on a dry fit. But with that panel just in front of the windscreen glued, you've got a bit of an anchor now, almost acts as a third hand, so you can just spread these parts apart, apply the glue, and then just with a little bit of gentle pressure, just making sure there's no steps, and the glue goes off quite quickly. And then straight away, now the glue is dry because we've hit it with the accelerator, we can go in with the Florimodel sanding sticks and just gently polish the seam. So as you can see there, you can see the white sanding dust, and you can see there's a bit of a sort of seam there. So just going in with the blade with a little bit more glue, and we'll just fill that seam. Now you can just leave this to dry naturally and then sand it back. It won't go as hard as traditional normal super glue, but I'm taking no chances, and I'm doing this for speed. So, and I can just see by eye that it just needs a little bit more. Actually, on the other kit, I didn't have to do any of this and ended up preserving the details. On this particular kit, this Israeli one, I ended up unfortunately obliterating that little bit of surface detail, but that's all down to me. It's nothing to do with the kit. And then just on the lower nose there, it's a little bit wider, so I'm just using some wider sanding sticks, and then just going down the grades. Apologies for the dirty hands there. That super glue actually is quite thin, and it very easily just runs all over your hand. So apologies for that. It's a bit minging. And then just finishing off with the final polish, again with the Florimodel sanding sticks. Now there's a little hole underneath there. You can see there's just been highlighted by the sanding dust. So I did actually go in with just a quick twist of a drill bit, just to make that more sharply defined. And then once it's glued from the outside, I just backed it up with a bit of extra thin. Belt and braces, probably didn't really need it, but this is going to help to weld the plastic on the inside, so you're getting the best of both worlds. And then the rear fuselage was not super glue this time, but just straight in with the Ammo of MIG extra thin, and that brush, which is lovely by the way, and you can see on my models I use it all the time. It's just so precise, it's brilliant. With the more viscous glue, it is actually a bit of a hindrance, actually, I would say. You're better off with a thicker brush, exactly how Tamiya do it. So, Ammo of MIG people, if you're listening, can you give us a thicker brush in that one, please? But the fit's so good, you don't need much, to be honest, cement, and you can just hold the parts, apply the glue, little bit of pressure, and then it's glued. And then I set it aside overnight in the end. I'm pretty sure on the other model actually I did use super glue for the rear fuselage seam, but both work equally as well. And that's a fuselage glued. Right, we're just going to have a dry fit now. So you can see with my left hand I'm just bending the wings down because the undercarriage mounting lugs stick out. So you do need to actually bend the wings down to spread them, but the dry fit, as you can see, is really nice. Two-piece tailplanes, which I thought was a little bit odd. I thought they could make them single piece, but as you can see, just a dry fit on that front seam, and it's easy. I did use a little bit of glue just on the inside, just to help. But literally, that's all the glue you need on the front there. Just a tiny smear, just to seal it. And then obviously the elevators are going to be on the back, so that's not so important. But the next day, just a very, very quick polish, and that front seam absolutely disappeared. So you can see the elevator there. It's got a couple of little lugs, but it's concave, and the front of the elevator is convex, so it holds really nicely. So just a little bit of glue applied, and then you can set the elevator. You can set it to what angle you really want, really, so you can have it flat, or as I did, just ever so slightly deflected. So the upper cowl piece, the gun troughs, just take care of that piano hinge that sticks out. That's very fragile, and it just slots into place. So I just ran a little bit of the liquid glue all around the seam. But on the real aeroplane, looking at the photographs, there was no panel line there. So I just went in again with a little bit of the black super glue and the accelerator, and exactly what I did on the panel in front of the windscreen. I just, with the blade, just applied it down the seam, and then we can go in with the sanding stick and just polish that out. And if you're careful, you don't need to go in with a rivet wheel and just replace any of the rivets. But because the glue is so thin and viscous, you can see there it has in places just run up and partially filled some of the panel lines at the front. So I did go in and sort that out with a scriber. And then ever decreasing grits, or ever increasing grits, whichever way you want to look at it, finer and finer, just to polish out the scratches. And I'm always checking with my finger, my thumb, and my thumbnail, just to see if there's any further filling required. But luckily in this case, no. Right, now for the bulges. These are obviously characteristic of the 109 G6 and this Avia variant. They fit really nicely. Just put them in place and then just ran the glue around them just to seal them in. And this is why I wouldn't fancy actually doing one with all the engine out detail, because I think one of the features of this aeroplane is all those bulges on the front, and you'll lose all that. Now this was a right fiddle, the carb intake, and it's purely because it's so small. But the way they've moulded it is you do get the seam running down the middle, so that's nice. So no need for stretch sprue or anything like that. And then that just sticks onto the mounting plate. So again, we'll just touch that in with a little bit of glue, just to hold that in place. And then that can be mounted onto the nose then. And you can see the seam, the external seam there, which is quite nice. If it will focus, come on, focus, thank you. And then we'll just drop a little bit of glue in there, and then just add this. And now obviously this is on the other side to the Daimler-Benz engine 109s, which I think is quite an interesting feature. Makes the left-hand side look a little bit cleaner. Job done. So a belt and braces, this might not necessarily be absolutely required, but I tend to do this pretty much on every seam, really, just because I'm not taking any chances. And actually there was a very slight gap on the other model. They were both very slightly different in how they went together, with, you know, just the tiniest of seams here and there in different places. So I'm putting that down to me, not the kit, very much so. So just with a paintbrush, I'm just painting on the Mr. Surfacer. I think this was 1200, so it is actually quite thin. And then I'm just brushing it over that cowling seam just to check it's not visible. So you could actually wait for the priming stage, but you know, why not? If I've got it, I've got the product open and ready, we may as well use it here as well. All sealed in. And now I'm just seam checking. That's all that is. You see that hole at the front. Being careful not to fill that in. Now obviously there was a panel line here on the real aeroplane, but the fit was so good, I just thought, well, why not just check the seam and then fill it in, and then I'll come in later and scribe it in. And there was the tiniest of little holes just at the back of the piano hinge. Didn't quite go far enough. 1/4 of a millimetre, not even that maybe. So I just filled that in with a bit of Mr. Surfacer too. Now we're going to remove the excess. So just a cotton bud dampened in Mr. Hobby thinner. I really wouldn't recommend using lacquer thinner. It is too hot and it will affect the plastic. It will start melting it. And actually I've had that with the rapid thinner as well, so I recommend just using the normal thinner. And then on some of the other seams I'm going to go in with a very fine sanding stick, again from Flory Models, and just a few swipes. That's all that's needed. And now we're just going to polish away any of the scratches. Now this is going to eliminate the rivets that run along the seam, but they're quite easily restored if you've got the kit, as you'll see later. And then this seam, it looked pretty good, so I could have just cleaned it up with the cotton bud and the thinner, but I thought I may as well polish it just in case. If there's any sort of micro scratches or anything like that, this will fill them. And then making sure I'm keeping the radius of the curve on the nose and on the tail. It's easy to sand in a flat spot, so I'm just being very careful, just rotating the sanding stick around just to make sure I keep the radius. And then just polishing away any of the scratches. Right, here we go, just restoring some of the panel lines. So this is one of my favourite tools in the toolbox. It's from RB Productions. Sadly no longer available. Effectively it's a little mini saw, but the teeth are so fine and they don't go that deep, so you can only really saw as deep as the panel line, which is cool. And then using a trumpeter scriber, although I know Revell have done this one as well. It's been in various manufacturers, but it's really very sharp. So having used that previous RB Productions tool, I'm just going to go in and effectively just clean out these panel lines using the scriber. And now replacing the rivets. So this is actually the 1/48 scale Rosie the riveter. The rivets are a little bit further apart, so the 48 scale one actually matched the rivet pattern really quite nicely. And what you can do is just gently, when you put it down, just move the rivet wheel so you actually find one of the rivets, and then you've got a consistent pattern. Okay, bit of Dymo tape, and I'm just putting in that panel line along the seam. So this was quite easy on this model because the aerial mast is on the canopy on the Galland hood version. It's more complicated on the bubble top because the aerial mast is on the on that seam. So there's a very short section between the DF loop bulge and the aerial, which is actually quite awkward to get that rivet wheel especially and the scriber in there. And then going in, now because there were no rivets here, I actually went in, as you can see, with the 1/72 scale riveter. I think maybe in hindsight I should have used the 48th. But I'm taking my time, look, going very slowly, just make sure I'm nice and accurate, because it's very easy to wander off. And then I'm just going to polish away the raised bits. And then we'll come in with the toothbrush and a bit of extra thin, just to clean out all that sanding dust. So there goes in the extra thin just to clean everything up. It's just the tiniest amount of cement on the brush. You really don't need very much at all. So a lot less than if you're actually going to glue a part. Just there to get rid of the dust. There we go, fuselage pretty much complete. So therefore it's time to add in the cockpit. So it goes in from underneath. And this is really neat. You don't really see this that much these days, but I think it's a really neat solution here. Fit is really nice. There was a slight gap there, so I'm just squeezing that closed with my finger and thumb. And actually, you can just, I did actually add a little bit of super glue and accelerator just to squeeze it shut, add the accelerator, and that gap disappears. So the fit's brilliant, and you can see those sort of lugs at the front of the floor. That's actually the undercarriage mounting. It's really sturdy, and it really sets that angle. It's brilliant. Okay, bending down the radiator flaps, and I'm doing this out of sequence according to the instructions, because what we don't want is we don't want to glue the wings and the fuselage together and then apply glue on the sort of flap and the wing root, because you're not going to be able to bend them down. You're going to have to slice it with a saw. So the wing just clips into place. As you can see, the fit is absolutely brilliant. So just holding it in place. Again, just a slight smear with the extra thin. And really, that's all you need. A little bit of pressure just to make sure it stays closed. And job done. And you can appreciate there with the drop flap that we're not going to have an issue. So now that it's actually joined, just a little smear of the glue, and that's just going to seal everything in. Although I did use a little bit of Mr. Surfacer after it, again, because I always do. It's not necessary. Now this rear part, it did actually kind of spring up a little bit, causing a little bit of a gap. So that's why I'm holding it down with my thumb as I'm gluing it. Now I did think about using super glue here, but I thought, no, we'll just go in and use the plastic cement. And just to hold that in place, I'm going to tape it up and then leave it overnight to set. And that way we're not really going to need any filler at all. Job done. So I did say, yeah, no filler required. There was a little bit of Mr. Surfacer at the back, just for belt and braces. But now we're going to apply the photo etch on the radiators. For those of you who don't like photo etch, you can get away with not using these because the actual opening is so small, you're really not going to see it. But it fits brilliantly. Sometimes you need a little, to sand a little bit down, but yeah, not in this case. They fit great. And as you can see, I didn't have to pre-paint either. Now the control surfaces. So the flaps come drooped already. So that's quite a nice touch because they were dropped on the ground. And again, they fit absolutely brilliantly. You can see I've put the tailplanes on as well. And the fit of the ailerons is absolutely amazing. We put that in and you've got to be careful that you don't obliterate the join. It's so fine. And the rudder really is just a push fit. Obviously I'm going to keep that separate because I'm going to spray that in the red and white stripy colour. And bending, so the radiators come single piece, so we're going to bend those down just to match the bit that's attached to the upper wing. There's a deep score line on the inside, so that makes it really quite simple. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to add them on. Again, the fit is absolutely wonderful. Tiniest amount of glue just to hold it in place and seal it all up. And all the angles for this are in the instructions. And they do actually glue together top and bottom as well. And that's the wings finished. Okay, now this is the optional part for the radiator, not radiator, what would it be? The oil cooler. And there was actually a bit of a gap. So I added a bit of white plastic card just to eliminate that gap. There we go, you can see it there. And I didn't have to do that on the other, on the Czech model. So that must have been down to me. The windscreen's been pre-painted inside and out in RLM 66, and then just the tiniest bit of glue again. Fit is absolutely amazing. That's a bit of a running theme with this kit. The fit is just superb. It just knocked my socks off. And the closed canopy fits equally as lovely. So I could have actually tapped that in place with a bit of white glue and sprayed it up at the same time, but I decided to use the closed bubble canopy just with a bit of blue tack, just to mask off the opening there. And that will just hold that in place. And there we are. That is the construction complete, and we're ready for paint now. So that brings us to the end of this part, and coming up in part 4, so I apply some of Nigel's custom masks. I paint the base coat, which was a mix of MRP colours. And then I had great fun in removing the masks. One of my favourite bits of modelling, that. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next bit for all that stuff. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.